My wife called me insecure for questioning her relationship with her boss. Then she posted a bed selfie in their group chat, captioned, "Real men trust." Her friends laughed. My kids saw it. I said nothing. Next day, I shut her up forever. Look, I'm not the kind of guy who thinks he's special. I'm Marcus Hale, high school math teacher, divorced dad energy even though I wasn't divorced yet, and the kind of person who puts ketchup on eggs without shame. My life was a solid B minus. Nothing flashy, nothing tragic, just predictable, in that comfortable way where you know exactly which drawer has the spare batteries and which coffee mug doesn't leak. I was grading math quizzes at 11:47 on a Tuesday night because that's what responsible adults do when they can't sleep and Netflix has nothing new worth watching. My red pen was working overtime on a kid's attempt to solve for x when he clearly thought algebra was a suggestion, not a requirement. I was about to write "See me after class" in that passive-aggressive teacher font when my phone lit up like a disco ball at a funeral. And just like that, my entire world went from three-dimensional to flatter than day-old soda. The notification was from a group chat I didn't even know existed until that exact moment. One of those things that makes you realize you've been living in a sitcom where everyone else got the script except you. The group was called Creative Wins, which should have been my first clue that nothing creative or winning was about to happen to me personally. I opened it because curiosity is a disease and I'm chronically infected. There she was, Serena, my wife of however many years it's been since I stopped counting anniversaries as victories and started counting them as participation trophies. She was wearing silk, the kind that costs more than my car payment, and she had this grin on her face that I recognized immediately as the one she reserves for two occasions. When she's had exactly 2.5 glasses of wine, or when someone's complimented her on something she already knew she looked good in. But it wasn't the silk or the grin that made my stomach drop like an elevator with cut cables. It was the ring on the wrong finger. The one that wasn't supposed to mean anything except maybe she'd run out of places to stack jewelry. And the caption underneath, written in that smug little font that somehow manages to look condescending, even in Arial, "Real men trust." I sat there staring at my phone screen like it was a letter from the IRS, trying to decode what fresh hell I'd just stumbled into. Her friends, and I use that term loosely because I'm pretty sure none of them would help you move furniture or pick you up from the airport, started flooding the chat with laughing emojis, the crying while laughing kind that people use when they think something is peak comedy but is actually just peak cruelty. Someone wrote "iconic" in all caps. Another one dropped a fire emoji followed by 3 crown emojis, which in the language of social media, I'm pretty sure translates to "you're better than your husband and we all agree." My chest felt like someone had opened it up, removed my heart, and replaced it with a block of gas station ice that was slowly melting into my lungs. You know that feeling when you drink coffee that's gone cold and your body rejects it on a molecular level? That, but emotional. Cold betrayal tastes exactly like room temperature Folgers. And let me tell you, I was drowning in it. I should have been clever. I should have screenshot the whole thing, locked my phone, taken a walk, called a lawyer, done literally anything that qualified as intelligent human behavior. But instead, I did what every man does when his brain short circuits and his pride takes the wheel. I answered a FaceTime call, yeah, because nothing says, "I'm handling this maturely," like a video call at midnight when you look like a rejected extra from a zombie movie, and your wife's clearly been up to extracurricular activities that didn't involve you. The call connected, and there she was, Serena, with her cheeks flushed, that specific shade of pink that means either she's been laughing too hard or she's been doing something she knows she shouldn't. And behind her, just casually existing in the background like a stock photo come to life, was Adrian Drake. Adrian freaking Drake, wearing a robe. Not just any robe, but the kind of robe that probably cost more than my monthly salary and definitely had its own LinkedIn profile. The kind of robe that says, "I make poor financial decisions, but I look great doing it." He waved. Actually waved. Like we were neighbors borrowing hedge trimmers and not two men connected by the fact that one of them was apparently entertaining the other's wife in a context that did not involve book clubs or PTA meetings. "Hey, Marcus," he said, and I swear to God his voice had that smooth quality that people use when they're trying to sound casual, but they're actually mentally calculating how fast they can exit a situation if it goes south. I didn't say anything, I just stared. Serena, bless her audacity, had the nerve to look annoyed with me. Not embarrassed, not apologetic, annoyed. Like I was the one inconveniencing her by existing and having the absolute gall to be confused about why another man was in a robe in what appeared to be a very nice hotel room that I definitely hadn't paid for. "You're being insecure," she said, "and I want you to understand the full weight of that sentence. Not, I can explain, not, this isn't what it looks like. Just straight to the character assassination. Speed running through the part where she pretends I'm the problem because I had the audacity to notice reality. Insecure, me, the guy who's been showing up, paying bills, remembering birthdays, and doing the emotional labor of an entire customer service department for over 2 decades. Insecure. I almost laughed, but laughing requires air, and I'm pretty sure my lungs had filed for early retirement. So I said nothing, absolutely nothing. For 40 minutes, I sat there with my mouth closed, watching her perform this one-woman show where she played the victim of my paranoia, while Adrian occasionally appeared in the frame like a director's commentary nobody asked for. And here's the thing about saying nothing. People think silence is weakness, but it's not. Silence is strategy. Silence is the moment before the storm when the air gets heavy and everything goes still, and you know something's about to break loose, but you can't quite tell what. For 40 minutes, I let her talk, let her justify, let her gaslight me with the confidence of someone who's had way too much practice. And while she talked, while she explained away the silk and the ring and the robe and the real men trust caption like it was all some big misunderstanding that only an insecure person would question, something was forming in my head. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Something that felt like a bruise forming under the skin. Dark and deliberate and spreading slowly. A plan. I didn't know all the details yet. Didn't know how it would play out or what the end game looked like. But I knew one thing for absolute certain. I was done being the punchline in someone else's joke. If Serena wanted to play games about trust, then fine, game on. But she was about to learn that the quiet guy grading math quizzes at midnight isn't someone you underestimate. Because while she was busy laughing with her friends and performing for Adrian in his LinkedIn robe, I was already 3 moves ahead, and checkmate was coming whether she saw it or not. The next morning arrived with all the enthusiasm of a root canal, and Serena waltzed into the kitchen like she was auditioning for a commercial about suburban bliss, where everyone's attractive and nobody has unresolved trauma. She was wearing yoga pants that cost more than my first car, and a smile that suggested last night's phone call had been completely erased from her memory bank, or at least filed away in that special compartment where inconvenient truths go to die. "Good morning," she said, pouring herself coffee from the pot I'd made, because apparently I'm still operating on autopilot, even when my marriage is actively decomposing. She didn't ask how I slept, didn't acknowledge the elephant in the room that was currently doing backflips on our kitchen table, just went straight into her usual routine, like we were living in one of those alternate universes where infidelity is just a minor scheduling conflict. "You're being paranoid," she said when I didn't immediately respond with my usual small talk about weather and traffic. Classic Serena. Deflect, dismiss, gaslight, repeat. It's like she had a playbook for this kind of thing. Probably downloaded it from the same website where she got tips on how to take flattering selfies in hotel rooms that aren't your house. I wanted to say something, wanted to ask her if she practiced that line in the mirror or if it just came naturally after years of treating honesty like an optional accessory, but I didn't. Instead, I took a sip of my coffee, burned my tongue because the universe has a sense of humor, and waited for the real entertainment to start. Enter Zoe. My daughter, my favorite human, the only person in this house who inherited my ability to detect nonsense from a mile away and call it out with the precision of a guided missile. Zoe's 16, which is that perfect age where you're old enough to understand that adults are mostly just tall children with credit cards, but young enough to have zero patience for their garbage. She walked into the kitchen with her phone in one hand and an expression that told me she'd already done her morning scroll through social media and had stumbled across something interesting. "Nice dress, Mom," she said. And the way she emphasized nice made it clear that nice was the exact opposite of what she meant. You trying to make a statement? Serena froze, and I mean completely froze, like someone had hit pause on a remote control that controlled her entire operating system. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth, suspended in that awkward position that would have been funny if everything wasn't so spectacularly awful. Zoe was staring at her phone, but her sideways grin said everything her words didn't. She'd seen the selfie. Of course she'd seen the selfie. These kids see everything. They're like the NSA, but with better memes and worse boundaries. What are you talking about? Serena asked, and her voice had that tight quality that people get when they're trying to sound casual but are actually internally screaming. Oh, nothing, Zoe said, finally looking up from her phone with the kind of innocent expression that guilty people use when they're pretending they don't know exactly what they've done. Just noticed you were wearing the same outfit in that group chat photo, the one with the ring on the wrong finger, and the caption about real men trusting. That one. She paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke from a house fire. Cute aesthetic, very Instagram core. Although personally, I think the whole cheating on dad vibe might not play well with your target demographic, but what do I know? I'm just a teenager with no life experience. I nearly choked on my coffee, and not because it was still too hot. Zoe had just delivered a verbal assassination with the casualness of someone ordering a pizza, and Serena looked like she'd been slapped with a frozen fish. Her face went through about 7 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, anger, denial, more anger, fear, calculation, and finally landing on defensive indignation, which is where guilty people always end up when they run out of better options. You don't understand the context, she started, but Zoe was already walking away, having successfully dropped her grenade and decided the aftermath wasn't worth sticking around for. Lucas wasn't home. My son was away at college, doing whatever it is college kids do, and they're not asking for money or complaining about cafeteria food. But I texted him the selfie anyway, because misery loves company. And also because I needed someone else to confirm that I wasn't losing my mind. His response came back faster than a pizza delivery. A single fire emoji followed by, "She's done." 3 words. That's all it took. My kid, who usually needs 17 text messages to tell me he needs laundry detergent, had summarized my entire marriage crisis in 3 words. She's done. Not you're done or the marriage is done. She's done. Past tense, finished, over. Like he'd already written her obituary in his head and moved on to planning the funeral reception. I didn't blow up the house, didn't throw dishes, didn't do any of the dramatic crap that people do in movies when they find out their spouse has been treating their marriage vows like suggestions from a fortune cookie. Instead, I did something way more useful. I brewed another pot of coffee because caffeine is the only constant in a universe actively trying to mess with me, and I checked the dash cam on Serena's car. Yeah, I'm that guy now. The guy who checks dash cam. Judge me all you want, but when your wife is taking selfies in silk with another man's surname in the background, you tend to start exploring your investigative options. The dash cam had audio. Of course it had audio. I'd installed it 6 months ago, after someone keyed her car in the grocery store parking lot, and she'd insisted we needed evidence for insurance purposes. Funny how tools designed for protection can become instruments of truth when the universe decides it's tired of your denial. I plugged the SD card into my laptop, clicked through a few files, and found what I was looking for. A conversation from 2 days ago, time-stamped at approximately when Serena said she was working late on a client presentation. The audio quality was decent enough that I could hear everything, and let me tell you, I immediately wished I couldn't. Her voice came through first, that laugh she does when she thinks something's hilarious but also slightly scandalous. Then Adrian's voice, smooth as expensive whiskey and twice as poisonous. They were talking about me. Not talking about me, mocking me. Casual, comfortable mockery, the kind that happens when people have had the same conversation multiple times and are now just riffing on familiar material. Adrian called me comfort support, which I guess is what you call someone when you're too classy to just say doormat. Serena laughed, actually laughed, and added that I was the stable option, emphasizing stable like it was the most boring word in the English language. Which I guess it is when you're someone who thinks stability is for suckers and excitement means hotel rooms with men in expensive robes. But the part that made me want to throw my laptop across the room. The part that made my hands shake and my jaw clench and every muscle in my body tense up like I was preparing for physical combat was when they talked about how easy I'd be to keep around. "He won't leave," Serena said, her voice matter of fact, like she was discussing weather patterns or grocery lists. "He's too invested, too scared of starting over. He'll complain, maybe sulk for a while, but he won't actually do anything." Adrian agreed, said something about how guys like that never do, and they both laughed again, this time longer, harder, like the idea of me being a predictable pushover was the funniest thing they'd heard all week. That was it. That was the moment. Not the selfie, not the robe, not even the "Real Men Trust" caption that was clearly designed to be some kind of inside joke at my expense. It was hearing my wife, the person I'd spent over 2 decades building a life with, reduce me to a character trait she could manage and manipulate. The stable option, comfort support. Too scared to leave. She'd calculated my entire existence down to a formula and decided I was safe to betray because I'd never have the spine to do anything about it. The quiet I'd been sitting in, the calm I'd maintained through the FaceTime call, and the morning coffee routine suddenly felt different. Not like peace, like the eye of a hurricane. Because Serena had just made the biggest miscalculation of her life. She thought I wouldn't leave, wouldn't fight, wouldn't do anything except absorb the damage and keep showing up like a loyal golden retriever who doesn't know any better. She was about to find out exactly how wrong she was, and honestly, I was almost excited to show her. I called Sam Reyes at 6 in the morning because if you're going to drag someone into your personal disaster, you might as well do it early enough that they're too tired to tell you no. Sam and I went back to Kandahar, back when we were younger and stupider, and thought getting shot at for a living was somehow more noble than dealing with suburban problems like homeowners associations and wives who treat marriage like a hobby they're getting bored with. Sam saved my ass more times than I can count over there, pulled me out of situations that would have ended with me in a body bag or worse, and now he runs a private security firm that mostly involves keeping rich people's teenagers from getting kidnapped and investigating insurance fraud. He wears ugly suits, like genuinely offensive suits that look like they were designed by someone who learned about fashion from a gas station magazine, but the man can find information faster than Google and with significantly less judgment. "Marcus," he answered, voice rough like he'd been gargling gravel. "This better be good or you're buying breakfast for a month." I told him it was better than good. It was a dumpster fire with my name on the mailbox, and I needed his particular skill set. 20 minutes later, he was at my house with coffee that actually tasted like coffee and not like someone's approximation of what coffee should taste like, and I showed him everything. The selfie, the group chat, the dash cam audio, the whole miserable collection of evidence that proved my wife thought I was too pathetic to fight back. Sam listened without interrupting, which is one of his greatest qualities. The man knows when to shut up and let someone purge their soul. And when I finished, he leaned back in my kitchen chair and looked at me with those dark eyes that had seen way worse things than cheating spouses, but somehow still managed to look concerned. "We plan," he said finally, setting down his coffee with the kind of deliberate care that meant he was already 3 steps ahead of me. "We don't punch people and expect applause. We don't go nuclear and hope the fallout lands in our favor. We plan, we execute, and we make sure every move is clean enough that nobody can say you did anything wrong except expose the truth." I nodded because that's exactly what I needed to hear. I didn't want revenge in the movie sense where everything explodes and someone ends up in jail. I wanted something surgical, something that would dismantle her narrative brick by brick until the whole structure collapsed and everyone could see exactly what had been holding it up. Sam cracked his knuckles, pulled out his laptop that looked like it had survived a war, which it probably had, and got to work. Turns out, Adrian Drake wasn't just some random dude in an expensive robe. Sam dug up his history faster than I could finish my second cup of coffee, pulling information from sources I didn't even know existed and probably shouldn't ask about, because plausible deniability is a real legal strategy. Adrian owned 3 luxury car dealerships, the kind that sell vehicles to people who think having leather seats is a personality trait. He'd been through a messy divorce 2 years ago, messy enough that it made the local business section because apparently rich people's personal drama qualifies as news when the settlement involves enough zeros. His ex-wife had some choice quotes about his pattern of pursuing relationships that benefit his professional network, which was, "Rich person speak for, he sleeps with clients and uses them for connections." The guy was basically a walking LinkedIn profile with a libido problem. But here's where it got interesting. And by interesting, I mean the kind of plot twist that makes you question whether reality has writers. Tara, Serena's younger sister, certified chaos merchant, and the kind of person who shows up to family dinners dressed like she's attending a music festival in a dimension where taste doesn't exist, had been cozying up to Adrian at parties. Sam had photos, actual photos from social media, because people document their own scandals now with the enthusiasm of tourists at national monuments. There was Tara at some gallery opening hanging on Adrian's arm like a decorative accessory. Tara at a charity golf tournament that neither of them looked interested in, standing close enough that personal space had clearly left the chat. Tara at what appeared to be someone's birthday party, whispering something in Adrian's ear while he smiled that same smooth smile he'd given me through the FaceTime screen. Your wife's sister's either really bad at reading social cues or she's playing the same game, Sam said, scrolling through more photos like he was reviewing evidence for a trial, which I guess he kind of was. My money's on option 2. This guy's got a type, and apparently that type is women related to each other, which is creepy on multiple levels, but also incredibly useful for us. I stared at the photos, trying to process what I was looking at. Serena and Tara had always been competitive, in that way sisters are, when their parents accidentally created a hierarchy by praising one slightly more than the other at a crucial developmental stage. Tara was younger, louder, more impulsive, the kind of person who treated life like an Instagram story that would disappear in 24 hours, so consequences didn't matter. If she was making moves on Adrian, it wasn't because she loved him. It was because Serena had him first, and Tara had built her entire personality around wanting what her sister had. So we've got a love triangle, except it's more like a love trapezoid, because you're still technically in the picture, Sam continued, pulling up what looked like financial records that I definitely didn't ask how he obtained. Adrian's dealerships are doing fine, not great, but fine. He's leveraged pretty heavily. A lot of debt hidden behind the flashy cars and the expensive lifestyle. Your wife's agency has him listed as a client. She did some creative consulting for his latest dealership opening. Tara works in event planning. And guess who planned that charity golf tournament? He tapped the screen. It's a whole little ecosystem of opportunists, and you're the only person in this equation who's been playing honest. I sat back, letting all the information settle in my brain like sediment in a river that's been flowing too fast for too long. Serena wasn't just cheating. She was part of a whole network of people who treated relationships like networking opportunities and loyalty like an outdated business model. Adrian was using her for connections and creativity and probably just the thrill of it, because guys like him get bored when life gets too easy. Tara was circling like a vulture, waiting for her chance to swoop in and claim whatever Serena left behind. And me? I was supposed to be the stable option, the comfort support, the guy who paid the mortgage and kept the family photos updated, and never asked too many questions, because asking questions would mean acknowledging that the life I'd built was constructed on a foundation that was already crumbling. We need a strategy, Sam said, and the way he said it reminded me of the old days, back when strategy meant the difference between coming home and not coming home. First, we gather everything. Every piece of evidence, every receipt, every text message, every moment where they thought they were being clever, but were actually just being sloppy. Second, we control the narrative. They think they're writing the story, but we're about to show them who's really holding the pen. Third, we execute with precision. No emotion, no drama. Just clean execution that leaves them with nothing to argue against except the truth they've been hiding. Zoe appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking between me and Sam like she'd just walked into a scene from a spy movie that was being filmed in her kitchen. "Are you two planning something illegal?" she asked, but there was excitement in her voice, not concern. This kid had clearly inherited my tolerance for chaos and Sam's appreciation for tactical thinking. Because if you are, I want in. Mom's been treating me like I'm too stupid to notice what's going on, and I've got feelings about that. Sam looked at me, eyebrows raised. "She's 16. I said, smart, observant, and apparently willing to commit to whatever this is becoming. Sam grinned, the kind of grin that should come with a warning label. "Domestic intelligence," he said. "Every good operation needs someone on the inside who can move without suspicion. Welcome to the team, kid." Zoe dropped her backpack and pulled up a chair, and I realized that what started as my personal disaster was becoming something else entirely. Not revenge, not even justice, really. More like an experiment in what happens when the person everyone underestimated decides to stop playing defense and start playing chess. Serena thought I was too invested to leave, too scared to fight back. She was about to learn that investment doesn't mean weakness. It means I know exactly what I'm fighting for. And I've got nothing left to lose except a marriage that was already dead. It just didn't know it yet. Serena forgot her phone charger at home on Thursday morning, which felt less like an accident and more like the universe deciding to participate in my tactical operations. She called me around 10, right in the middle of my third period geometry class, where I was trying to explain the Pythagorean theorem to a room full of teenagers who thought math was a conspiracy invented by old people to make them suffer, and asked if I could possibly, maybe pretty please, drop it off at her agency because she had meetings all afternoon and her phone was at 12%, and apparently that's a crisis worth interrupting someone's workday over. Her voice had that sugary quality she uses when she wants something, the same tone she probably used with Adrian when she wanted him to book a hotel room with thread counts higher than my credit score. "You're a lifesaver," she said, and I wondered if she appreciated the irony of calling me a lifesaver while actively drowning our marriage in the deep end. I told her I'd swing by during my lunch break, hung up, and immediately texted Sam and Zoe in our newly formed group chat that we'd ironically named Comfort Support Squad. Sam responded with a thumbs up and opportunity knocks. Zoe sent back a gif of someone rubbing their hands together like a cartoon villain, which pretty much summed up how I was feeling. This wasn't just delivering a charger. This was reconnaissance, infiltration, the kind of operation that would have made our drill sergeants back in Kandahar either proud or deeply concerned about what we'd learned on their watch. I grabbed Serena's charger from the nightstand, the one she'd left plugged in next to a book she'd been pretending to read for 6 months, and headed to Jefferson Creative Agency with my heart, doing that thing where it beats faster than it should, but you're not sure if it's anxiety or excitement or just your body's way of telling you you're about to do something monumentally stupid. The agency was in one of those renovated warehouse buildings that used to make actual useful things, but now just houses companies that make PowerPoint presentations and call it innovation. All exposed brick and industrial lighting, the kind of place where people wear expensive sneakers to work and think having a ping pong table makes them a fun workplace culture. I walked in through the front entrance, trying to look like a regular husband doing a regular favor and not like someone who was about to commit what I'm pretty sure qualifies as corporate espionage. Except it's your own wife, so maybe it's just regular espionage with better legal standing. Neil was at the front desk, and Neil is exactly the kind of person you'd expect to find at a front desk in a creative agency. Overstyled hair, glasses that probably don't have prescription lenses, and a smile that suggests his entire personality was downloaded from an influencer's Instagram feed. "Marcus," he said, like we were old friends even though we'd met exactly twice, and both times he'd called me Martin. "Here to see Serena?" I held up the charger like it was a hall pass. "Just dropping this off real quick. She's in meetings, right? I can just leave it in her office." Neil's face did this thing where it clearly wanted to say no, but also didn't want to deal with the social awkwardness of denying a simple request from someone's husband. So he landed on a compromise that involved nodding enthusiastically while also looking vaguely uncomfortable. "Sure, yeah, totally. You know where her office is. 5 minutes, though, okay? We've got a strict policy about visitors during work hours." He said this like he was enforcing national security protocols, and not just making up rules because he'd watched too many corporate training videos. I thanked him with the kind of gratitude that people use when they're pretending to be grateful but are actually just trying to end a conversation. And I headed towards Serena's office with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there. Her office was on the second floor, corner position with windows that overlooked the parking lot where people paid monthly fees that could have fed a family of 4. The door was unlocked because apparently security isn't a concern when you work in a place where the most valuable thing is someone's half-finished creative brief. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, and for about 10 seconds, I just stood there, taking it all in. The pristine desk with its color-coordinated supplies, the mood board on the wall full of inspirational quotes that meant nothing, the framed photo of us from 3 years ago when we'd gone to Napa and pretended we still enjoyed each other's company. Zoe had taught me the tricks during our planning session the night before, sitting at the kitchen table with her phone and a level of technical knowledge that made me question what exactly kids are learning in school these days, besides how to bypass parental controls. You need about 3 minutes to clone a phone if you know what you're doing, she'd explained, pulling up a tutorial video that had been viewed by approximately 7 million people who apparently all had trust issues. The software works fast, mirrors everything, messages, photos, emails, the whole digital footprint. Then you've got 2 minutes to look around, take photos of anything physical that seems useful, and get out before anyone wonders why you're taking so long to drop off a phone charger. I pulled out the phone I'd prepared that morning, a burner that Sam had provided with software already installed, because apparently he keeps this stuff on hand for situations exactly like this, and plugged it into Serena's computer. The screen lit up with a progress bar that moved with agonizing slowness, like it was deliberately trying to give me a heart attack. While it cloned, I looked around her desk, rifling through drawers with the kind of calm efficiency that comes from years of grading papers and learning to ignore your own moral discomfort. Bottom drawer had the usual office supplies: pens, sticky notes, a stapler that probably cost $40 because it was designed by someone Swedish. Middle drawer was more interesting: receipts, printed confirmations for hotel reservations, and the calendar with dates circled in red pen that didn't correspond to any family events I remembered. The computer dinged softly, progress complete, and I unplugged my phone just as voices echoed in the hallway outside. I grabbed a notebook from her desk, spiral-bound, full of handwritten notes and Serena's looping script, and took a quick photo of a page that listed names, dates, and what appeared to be budget numbers for something called Client Entertainment Drake. Client Entertainment. That's what we're calling it now. I shoved the notebook back, arranged the desk exactly how I'd found it, left the charger plugged in prominently on her desk mat where she couldn't possibly miss it, and walked out of her office with the kind of calm that suggested I definitely hadn't just committed several violations of trust and possibly some actual laws. Neil looked up when I passed the front desk, gave me a thumbs up like we'd just completed a successful transaction at a car wash, and I waved back with the hand that wasn't gripping my phone like it contained nuclear launch codes. I made it to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in 10 minutes. My hands were shaking slightly, that post-adrenaline tremor that happens when your body realizes you've just done something risky and wants to file a formal complaint. I pulled out my phone, the burner with the cloned data, and opened the Messages app. It was all there. Everything. Every text message Serena had sent and received, every photo she'd shared in private chats, every piece of digital evidence that proved exactly what I already knew but hadn't wanted to fully acknowledge. The messages were worse than the selfie, worse than the dash cam audio, worse than anything I'd prepared myself for. There were group threads with her friends where they discussed me like I was a character in a TV show they'd gotten bored with but kept watching out of habit. "He's so controllable," someone named Jessica had written. "Honestly impressive," Serena had replied. "I thought he'd make it harder, but he just kind of accepts everything." Another thread with Adrian, full of inside jokes and references to Marcus situations that needed to be managed. A message from Tara, because of course Tara was in on this too, that said, "Real men trust," followed by, "Does he actually believe you're working late, or is he just pretending?" Serena's response, "Does it matter? Either way, he's not going anywhere." I sat there in the parking lot reading through my wife's digital life like it was a horror novel where I was simultaneously the victim and the punchline. And something crystallized in my brain that had been forming since that first selfie notification. This wasn't just betrayal. This was systematic, calculated, ongoing mockery. They'd turned my existence into entertainment, my trust into a running joke, my entire marriage into a case study in how much disrespect one person can absorb before they finally break. The receipts I'd photographed were for hotels, restaurants, weekend getaways that had happened during times when Serena told me she was at conferences or client meetings or helping Tara with event planning. The calendar dates corresponded to charges on our joint credit card that I'd noticed but hadn't questioned because questioning your spouse about every expense feels petty until you realize those expenses were funding your own humiliation. I drove back to school in a daze, taught 2 more classes on autopilot while my brain processed everything I'd just acquired. And by the time the final bell rang, I had made a decision. This wasn't about getting even anymore. This wasn't about revenge or justice. or any of those dramatic concepts that sound good but don't actually solve anything. This was about documentation, about creating an irrefutable record of exactly what had happened, so that when everything finally came apart, and it would come apart, I'd make sure of it. Nobody could rewrite history or claim I was being irrational or suggest that maybe I'd misunderstood the situation. Serena thought I was controllable, thought I'd keep accepting everything because I was too invested to walk away. She was right that I was invested. She was just catastrophically wrong about what that investment would make me willing to do. Now we get to the part that people absolutely love in the comments section. The part where quiet revenge stops being theoretical and starts involving actual shrimp. Let me be clear. I'm not proud of what we did, but I'm also not proud, if that makes sense. It exists in this weird moral gray area where technically nobody got hurt, but also someone's Ferrari smelled like a dumpster behind a seafood restaurant during a heat wave. And honestly, that feels like the kind of poetic justice that Shakespeare would have appreciated if he'd had access to raw shellfish in a luxury vehicle. Sam called it proportional response with theatrical elements. Zoe called it chaotic good. I called it Tuesday night because apparently this is what my life had become. A math teacher conducting covert operations in expensive neighborhoods, while his daughter provided logistical support and his army buddy drove the getaway car. We tailed Adrian to his riverside house on a Wednesday evening, following at a distance that Sam assured me was professional and not at all creepy, even though it definitely felt creepy because following people in cars is inherently creepy regardless of your justifications. Adrian lived in one of those developments where every house looks like it was designed by someone who'd seen exactly one episode of a home renovation show and decided that was sufficient architectural education. His place was all glass and sharp angles, the kind of house that screams, "I have money but no actual personality," to everyone within a 5-mile radius. The Ferrari was parked in the driveway like a red middle finger to everyone who drives sensible vehicles, and I felt a small surge of satisfaction knowing that car was about to have a very bad week. Sam parked 3 houses down, killed the engine, and looked at me with the kind of expression that suggested he was either having second thoughts or running through a mental checklist of everything that could go wrong. "Last chance to back out," he said, which was nice of him, but also completely unnecessary because I'd already passed the point of backing out somewhere around the time I read my wife's messages calling me controllable. We do this clean, we do it fast, and we absolutely do not break anything that would qualify as actual property damage. Smell is temporary. Dignity loss is permanent. Got it? I nodded, grabbed the bag of raw shrimp we'd purchased from a discount grocery store that definitely didn't ask questions about why someone needed 5 pounds of already suspect seafood, and stepped out into the evening air that smelled significantly better than it was about to. Breaking into the Ferrari was easier than it should have been, which tells you something about people who buy expensive cars but don't invest in decent security systems. Sam had tools. I didn't ask where he got them, didn't ask if they were legal, just accepted that my life now included lockpicks and moral flexibility. And within 2 minutes, we had the door open and were staring at an interior that probably cost more than my annual salary. Leather seats, dashboard that looked like a spaceship control panel, and that new car smell that was about to become a very old fish smell. I pulled out the first handful of shrimp, held it for a second, while my brain tried one last time to convince me this was insane, and then shoved it deep into the air conditioning vent. Then another handful, then another. Sam worked on the other side, stuffing shrimp into every vent he could find with the efficiency of someone who'd clearly done weirder things in his professional career and wasn't about to judge. The vents weren't enough, though. We needed coverage, needed something that would permeate every fiber and surface and make the entire vehicle uninhabitable. That's where the milk came in. Spoiled milk, specifically, the kind that had been sitting in Sam's trunk for 3 days and in temperatures that would have violated several health codes. We poured it into the AC system, into the cup holders, into the little storage compartments that luxury cars have for storing things like sunglasses and broken dreams. The smell was immediate and horrifying, and I had to breathe through my mouth to avoid gagging. But there was also something deeply satisfying about watching this monument to Adrian's ego slowly transform into a biohazard on wheels. But we weren't done, because Sam had brought spray paint. Washable spray paint, he made sure to specify. Because apparently even in our descent into petty crime, We had standards, and I'd been workshopping the perfect message since we'd started planning this operation. Real men trust, I wrote across the windshield in letters big enough to read from space, adding a question mark because I wanted Adrian to really think about the irony. Sam added a few artistic flourishes that I won't describe because they involved crude drawings, and my mother raised me better than to repeat such things. And then we closed everything up, wiped down our prints like we'd seen in approximately 1 million crime shows, and got back in Sam's car before anyone could spot us committing what was technically vandalism, but felt more like community service. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded the next morning. I know this because Zoe showed me during breakfast, scrolling through posts with the kind of glee that concerned me as a parent, but impressed me as a co-conspirator. Vandalism at Adrian Drake's residence, read the first post, written by some woman named Barbara, who apparently had nothing better to do than monitor her neighbors' properties for signs of moral decay. The comments were beautiful, a perfect mix of pearl-clutching concern and barely disguised schadenfreude. "Who would do such a thing?" asked someone whose profile picture was a golden retriever. "Karma's got a sense of humor," replied someone else, and I wanted to find that person and buy them a coffee because they got it. They understood the assignment. "Maybe he shouldn't have been such a sleazebag," wrote another commenter. And that kicked off a whole thread about Adrian's reputation, his messy divorce, the rumors about him sleeping with clients, all these things that apparently everyone knew, but nobody had said out loud until someone gave them permission via the comments section of a Facebook post about vandalized luxury vehicles. It was like watching a dam break, all this accumulated gossip and suspicion suddenly flooding into public view, and Adrian couldn't do anything except watch his reputation deteriorate in real time alongside his Ferrari's resale value. Serena panicked. I know because she called me 3 times during my lunch period, her voice tight with that specific kind of stress that comes from realizing your secret life isn't as secret as you thought. "Someone vandalized Adrian's car," she said, like this was tragic news that should concern me deeply. "They wrote horrible things. The police think it might be related to his business dealings, but it feels personal, Marcus. Really personal." I made sympathetic noises while eating my sandwich, the kind of non-committal sounds that could mean anything or nothing depending on interpretation. "That's terrible," I said. And technically I wasn't lying because it was terrible. Terrible for Adrian, terrible for his Ferrari, terrible for everyone who'd assumed they could operate without consequences because the stable guy would never fight back. "Do you think someone knows?" she asked. And there was fear in her voice now. Real fear. The kind that comes from understanding that secrets have expiration dates, and hers might be approaching faster than anticipated. "Knows what?" I asked, playing dumb with Oscar-worthy commitment. About anything. About business stuff. About relationships. About anything someone might be upset about. She was fishing, trying to figure out if I knew, if I'd connected the dots, if I was the kind of person who'd retaliate with shrimp and spray paint. "I don't know what you mean," I said. And that was actually true because I genuinely didn't know what specific things she was worried about me knowing. The affair, the mockery, the financial stuff Sam had dug up, or just the general awareness that she'd been treating our marriage like a side project she'd lost interest in. She blamed everything on stalkers, told her friends and coworkers that Adrian must have angry ex-clients or jealous competitors, spun this whole narrative about how successful people attract negative attention from bitter individuals who can't handle other people's success. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife, but nobody called her on it because people generally don't call out other people's obvious lies unless they have a personal reason to care. I sipped my coffee and said nothing, because silence had become my favorite weapon and I was getting really good at using it. Every time Serena tried to fill the quiet with explanations or theories or anxious speculation, I just nodded and made non-committal sounds and watched her spiral deeper into paranoia. The best part, and by best I mean most satisfying in that dark way where you know you're being petty, but you've decided petty is actually a valid life choice, was watching Adrian try to deal with the aftermath. His dealership had a big client event that weekend, some kind of luxury vehicle showcase where rich people pretend to care about horsepower and torque while actually just measuring their status against other rich people. Adrian showed up in a rental car, which is like showing up to a wine tasting with a flask of gas station vodka, and everyone noticed. Sam had friends at the dealership who reported back that Adrian spent the entire event fielding questions about the vandalism, trying to laugh it off while also clearly being completely humiliated that someone had reduced his prized possession to a mobile seafood nightmare. He had to have it professionally detailed 3 times, Sam told me later, grinning like this was the best news he'd heard all year. Even after that, people said it still smelled weird. Something about shrimp oil, getting into the upholstery, becoming one with the leather. Mechanics told him he might just have to accept that his car smells like low tide now. I felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt, but was more likely just indigestion from the cafeteria meatloaf. And then I remembered the dash cam audio where Adrian and Serena laughed about how easy I'd be to keep around. And the guilt evaporated faster than dignity at a reality TV reunion show. Smell is temporary, Sam had said. Dignity loss is permanent. Adrian's Ferrari would eventually recover. His reputation as the smooth, untouchable guy who always came out on top, that was taking damage that no amount of professional detailing could fix. And honestly, that felt like exactly the right amount of justice for a Wednesday evening's work. That Monday, I uploaded one slide into Serena's agency lobby rotation, and I want you to understand the sheer simplicity of what I'm about to describe, because sometimes the most devastating moves are the ones that require the least effort. The agency had this digital display in their reception area, one of those massive screens that cycles through company announcements, client testimonials, motivational quotes that mean nothing, and occasionally someone's birthday celebration that nobody actually cares about, but everyone pretends to because workplace culture demands performative enthusiasm. Neil managed the display. Of course, Neil managed it because giving Neil responsibilities is apparently what passes for management strategy at Jefferson Creative. And Neil had the password written on a sticky note under his keyboard because security is apparently just a suggestion when you work somewhere that thinks exposed brick equals innovation. I'd gone back to the agency on Friday afternoon, told Neil I needed to grab something from Serena's office that she'd forgotten, and he'd wave me through with all the vigilance of a mall security guard on their last day before retirement. While I was allegedly grabbing whatever fictional item Serena had allegedly forgotten, I took a casual stroll past Neil's desk during a moment when he was in the bathroom, probably taking a selfie or whatever Neil does when he's unsupervised, and I checked under his keyboard. There it was, a yellow sticky note with display 2023, written in his unnecessarily stylized handwriting, because of course Neil's password would include an exclamation point. I took a photo, replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, and left with a smile that probably looked friendly, but was actually the smile of someone who'd just acquired the keys to the kingdom and was planning to burn it down from the inside. Creating the slide took me about 20 minutes on Sunday night while Zoe provided creative direction and Zoe's sense of aesthetic, which is surprisingly good for someone whose idea of formal wear is a hoodie without stains. We used Serena's selfie, the one with the silk and the ring on the wrong finger and that smug grin that now made my stomach turn, and placed it front and center. Below it, in clean, professional font that matched the agency's branding, because attention to detail matters, even in acts of domestic warfare. We added the caption, "Real men trust," in quotes. And then, because I'm apparently committed to thoroughness, we included a bullet list. Dates, timestamps, hotels, a transcript snippet from the dash cam audio, where Serena says, "He's so controllable," followed by Adrian's laugh and his response about how guys like me never actually do anything. The slide was a masterpiece of restraint. No crude language, no dramatic accusations, just facts presented in the same corporate style the agency used for their client presentations. If you didn't know the context, you might think it was some kind of weird art project, or maybe a social commentary piece on modern relationships. But if you knew, and everyone at the agency was about to know, it was a nuclear bomb wrapped in PowerPoint formatting. Zoe looked at the final version and whistled low. "Dad, this is cold. Like ice cold. Like Antarctica during winter cold." I saved it as Q4 Overview JPG because disguising it as something boring meant it might cycle through a few times before anyone noticed what they were actually looking at. And then I went to bed early because I wanted to be well rested for what was about to become the best Monday morning of my entire life. I uploaded it remotely at 6 a.m., logging into the display system from my laptop while drinking coffee that tasted better than it had any right to given what I was about to do. The system was beautifully simple. Drop files into a folder, set them to rotation, and they'd automatically cycle through every 2 minutes, along with whatever other content was scheduled. I set my slide to appear 3 times during the morning rush between 8 and 10, when the agency was fullest with employees arriving and clients dropping by for meetings. 90 seconds per appearance. That's all you need for a rumor to become fossilized truth, for casual glances to become double takes, for whispers to start spreading like a virus through an office that runs on gossip and overpriced coffee. The first text came at 8:47. Sam had stationed himself at a coffee shop across the street with a clear view of the agency's lobby through their enormous glass windows. Because apparently we're running a full surveillance operation now, and I've accepted that this is just who I am as a person. "It's up," he texted. "People are stopping. Someone just pulled out their phone. This is beautiful, Marcus. Genuinely beautiful." I was in the middle of teaching first period algebra, explaining quadratic equations to students who looked at me like I was speaking ancient Sumerian, when my phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Marcus Hale? This is Rebecca from Jefferson Creative. We need to talk about something that appeared on our display this morning. It concerns your wife." I waited until my planning period to call back, let Rebecca stew in whatever panic she was experiencing, and when I finally returned her call, she sounded like someone who'd been tasked with defusing a bomb, but had only read the first chapter of the manual. "Mr. Hale, there was an image on our lobby display. It showed Mrs. Hale in what appears to be a compromising situation with another man, along with some very concerning text messages. Do you know anything about this?" I took a long sip of my terrible school coffee and said, "Sounds like someone wants the truth to be visible. Has anyone asked Serena about it?" The line went quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Hale left the building approximately 30 minutes ago. She seemed very upset." Neil called me next, his voice shaky with that specific frequency of panic that happens when someone realizes they're probably going to be blamed for something they didn't do but should have prevented. "Marcus, I don't know how this happened. Someone hacked our system. They put up this slide with Serena and some guy, and it played for like 90 seconds before I could shut it down. But people saw it, Marcus. A lot of people saw it and took pictures, and now it's in the company's Slack, and I think I'm going to get fired." I almost felt bad for Neil. But then I remembered he'd been working in an office where everyone apparently knew about Serena's extracurricular activities, and nobody had thought to mention it to the guy paying her bills. So my sympathy dried up faster than paint in the desert. "That's rough, Neil," I said, putting just enough concern in my voice to sound genuine while internally celebrating the chaos. "I'm sure it'll blow over once everyone realizes it's just a misunderstanding." Except it wasn't a misunderstanding, and we both knew it, and the beautiful thing about the truth is that once it's out there, once people have seen it and screenshot it and started discussing it in group chats and company Slack channels, you can't put it back in the box. The slide had played for 90 seconds across 3 rotations, which meant it had been visible for a total of 4.5 minutes. And in those 4.5 minutes, approximately 37 people had seen it, according to Sam's count of people who stopped and stared and pulled out their phones. 37 people times however many people they'd tell, multiplied by social media's ability to spread information faster than norovirus on a cruise ship, divided by the average person's love of drama, equals complete and total exposure. The office erupted, and I know this because people started reaching out to me like I was some kind of victim support hotline. Former colleagues of Serena's, people who'd met me at company parties and remembered me as the quiet husband who brings good appetizers, suddenly had opinions and information they wanted to share. One woman named Patricia called to tell me she'd always thought something was off about how close Serena and Adrian seemed at events. Another person, a guy named Todd, who worked in accounts, said he'd seen them leaving a hotel together 6 months ago, but hadn't wanted to say anything because it wasn't his business. That's the thing about secrets. Everyone knows, but nobody says anything until someone else says it first. And then suddenly everyone's got a story they've been sitting on. Serena called at 11:30, and her voice had that quality that happens when someone's been crying but is trying to sound angry instead, because anger is easier to manage than humiliation. "You did this," she said, not as a question but as an accusation that had already been tried and convicted in her head. "You hacked our system. You sabotaged me. You're trying to ruin my career because you're insecure and you can't handle that I have a life outside of our marriage." The word insecure again. Her favorite weapon, the one she'd been using for weeks to deflect any legitimate concerns I had about her behavior. I let her finish her speech, let her run through all the accusations and justifications, and attempts to flip the script so that somehow I was the villain for exposing what she'd done instead of her being the villain for doing it in the first place. "Serena," I said when she finally paused to breathe, my voice calm, in that way that I knew would infuriate her more than yelling ever could. "I didn't hack anything. I uploaded a single slide with information that's completely accurate. Dates, times, messages, all of it true. If seeing the truth displayed publicly makes you feel bad, maybe the problem isn't the display. Maybe it's what you've been doing." She started to respond, probably with another round of gaslighting about how I was interpreting things wrong or taking things out of context. But I cut her off. "I've been secure for 22 years. I've been stable, reliable, the comfort support you and Adrian laughed about. I'm finished being a punchline in my own marriage." The line went quiet, and I could hear voices in the background, probably her friends or coworkers trying to figure out what kind of damage control could possibly fix this situation. "You've ruined everything," she said finally, and her voice had lost the anger, replaced by something that sounded almost like defeat. "My job, my reputation, everything I've built." I thought about the dashcam audio, about her saying I'd never leave because I was too invested, too scared of starting over. I thought about the group chat messages where she and her friends treated my trust like a joke. I thought about 22 years of showing up and being present and doing the work while she collected the benefits and apparently entertained other men in her spare time. "No," I said, "you ruined everything. I just made sure people could see it." I hung up before she could respond, blocked her number because I was done with conversations that went nowhere, and sat at my desk feeling something that wasn't quite satisfaction but wasn't regret either. The slide had done exactly what it was supposed to do. It had taken the private humiliation she'd been inflicting on me and made it public, had shifted the narrative from "Marcus is insecure" to "Serena betrayed her husband and got caught." 90 seconds. That's all it took to dismantle years of carefully constructed lies. In the age of screenshots and social media, the truth doesn't need a long presentation. It just needs to be visible, long enough for people to hit record. Mrs. Hughes called me at 3:15 on Tuesday afternoon, and I knew before answering that something magnificent had happened because Mrs. Hughes only calls for two reasons. She needs help with her computer, or there's neighborhood drama worth documenting. "Marcus," she said, voice trembling with the kind of excitement that elderly women reserve for grandchildren and scandal. "There's shouting in your driveway, loud shouting. I thought you should know before the whole street starts recording." I thanked her, told her I'd handle it, and felt a smile spread across my face that probably would have concerned a therapist, but felt absolutely perfect to me. They'd come to my house. They'd actually driven to my house to confront me, which meant they'd officially abandoned any pretense of having the moral high ground, and were now operating purely on wounded pride and desperation. I walked outside with the casual energy of someone checking the mail, not someone about to engage in suburban warfare with an audience of retired neighbors who had nothing better to do than watch other people's lives implode. And there they were, the unholy trinity of my personal nightmare, standing in my driveway like they were about to stage an intervention, except the only thing that needed intervening was their collective inability to understand consequences. Serena was in full creative director mode, dressed in one of those outfits that costs more than reasonable and is supposed to communicate success, but really just communicates insecurity about appearing successful. Tara stood next to her in something that looked like she'd raided a thrift store after several drinks and declared herself a fashion icon. And Adrian, because of course Adrian had tagged along, wore sunglasses expensive enough to have their own insurance policy and an expression that suggested he thought he could charm his way out of the situation like he'd apparently charmed his way into it. "Marcus," Serena started, and her voice had that tight quality that happens when someone's trying to project authority but is actually barely holding it together. "We need to talk about what you've been doing. The slide at my office, the vandalism at Adrian's house. You've crossed a line." I leaned against my front door, crossed my arms, and raised my eyebrows in what I hoped was an expression of polite interest. "Have I? What line exactly? The one where I share truthful information about my own marriage? Or the one where I allegedly had something to do with whatever happened to Adrian's car, which I definitely don't know anything about?" Adrian stepped forward, puffing his chest like a pigeon trying to intimidate a cat, and I had to suppress a laugh, because the man was wearing loafers without socks and thought he looked threatening. "You think you're clever," Adrian said, and his voice had that smooth quality that probably worked on car buyers and lonely wives, but just sounded slimy to me. Posting private information, destroying property, playing these little games. You're not clever, Marcus. You're pathetic. You're a bitter man who can't handle that his wife outgrew him. I nodded slowly, pretending to consider his words, while internally cataloging every visible neighbor peeking from curtains and every phone probably recording from windows. Mrs. Hughes was on her porch with a cup of tea that she definitely didn't need, but had brought outside specifically to have a reason to watch. Mr. Peterson from 2 houses down was trimming hedges that didn't need trimming. The Martinez family's teenage son had positioned himself by their mailbox with his phone out, not even pretending he wasn't filming. "That's an interesting theory, Adrian," I said, keeping my voice level and pleasant like we were discussing weather patterns. "But here's a question. If everything I posted was lies, why are you here? Why not just call the police, file charges, let the legal system handle it? Why drive to my house with my wife and her sister to have this conversation in my driveway where I notice approximately 8 neighbors are currently watching?" I gestured vaguely at the surrounding houses, and all 3 of them instinctively turned to look, which was a mistake because it confirmed they knew they had an audience, and that knowledge made them visibly uncomfortable. Tara decided this was her moment to contribute, because apparently she'd been standing there, feeling left out of the drama. "You've always been jealous of Serena's success," she said, and I genuinely had to pause and recalibrate because the audacity of that statement required a moment of appreciation. "You're a teacher, Marcus, a high school math teacher. She's a creative director at a prestigious agency. She outgrew you, and instead of being happy for her, you're trying to tear her down." I looked at Tara, really looked at her, and saw someone who'd spent her entire life competing with her older sister and had convinced herself that moral boundaries were just suggestions for people who weren't special enough to ignore them. "Tara," I said, and I put enough disappointment in my voice that it sounded like I was addressing one of my students who'd been caught cheating. "I've seen the photos of you and Adrian at parties. The way you hang on his arm when Serena's not looking. The messages where you called her relationship convenient until something better comes along. You're not defending your sister. You're defending your position in line." Her face went red. That specific shade that happens when someone gets called out so accurately they can't even formulate a denial. And she looked at Adrian like he was supposed to defend her. But Adrian was too busy looking at me with an expression that suggested he was recalculating exactly how much I knew. Serena tried to take control back, stepping forward with her hands raised like she was trying to calm a situation that she'd created. "This is ridiculous. Marcus, you're making a scene. The neighbors are watching. Don't you have any dignity left?" And that's when I started laughing, actually laughing, because the sheer irony of my wife lecturing me about dignity while standing in my driveway with her affair partner and her sister who wanted to be next in line was too perfect to ignore. "Dignity?" I said, still laughing. "Serena, you posted a selfie in another man's hotel room with a caption mocking your husband, and your friends laughed about it. You called me controllable. You said I'd never leave because I was too invested. You treated our marriage like a joke, and now you're concerned about dignity?" I pulled out my phone, held it up so they could all see, and said the magic words that made all 3 of them freeze, like I'd pulled out a weapon. "Should I call the police? Because I'd love to explain to them why 3 people drove to my house to threaten me about exposing an affair that apparently wasn't an affair, but also somehow requires this level of confrontation. I'm sure they'd love to hear the whole story, all of it, with dates and timestamps and audio recordings." Adrian's face went pale, which was impressive given that he clearly spent money on maintaining his tan. Tara took a step back, suddenly very interested in her shoes. Serena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish trying to remember how breathing worked. "That's what I thought," I said, lowering my phone but not putting it away. "See, here's the thing about telling the truth. It's legal. Posting accurate information about my own marriage? Legal. Sharing text messages that were sent to me or about me? Legal. Creating a slideshow with facts? Legal. What's not legal is harassment, trespassing, and conspiracy to commit fraud, which is what you 3 have been doing for months, with your little arrangement where Serena gets Adrian's money and connections, Adrian gets his ego stroked by 2 sisters, and Tara gets to feel special by being involved in someone else's relationship. I was making some of this up, throwing around legal terms with the confidence of someone who'd watched approximately 400 hours of legal dramas and assumed that was close enough to actual knowledge, but they didn't know that. Mr. Peterson had stopped pretending to trim his hedges and was just openly watching now, which I appreciated because at least he was being honest about his voyeurism. Mrs. Hughes had pulled out her phone, probably texting her book club group chat with live updates. The Martinez kid was definitely still recording, and I made a mental note to send his parents a gift card for raising a child who understood the importance of documentation. Adrian tried one more time to salvage his tough guy image. "You're going to regret this," he said, but his voice had lost its smoothness and now just sounded tired. "My lawyers will what?" I interrupted. "Sue me for telling the truth? Please do. I'd love to sit in a deposition and go through every text message, every receipt, every piece of evidence in front of a judge. I'm sure that'll be great for your dealership's reputation when it becomes public record." He didn't respond, just adjusted his unnecessarily expensive sunglasses and looked at Serena like she was supposed to have a plan. She didn't. She looked between me and Adrian and Tara like she was running calculations and realizing that every equation ended with her losing something. Her marriage, her reputation, her job security, her sister's loyalty, or possibly all of the above. "Get off my property," I said, and I didn't yell it or dramatize it. Just stated it as a fact that required acknowledgement. "All three of you, go back to your lives and figure out how you're going to explain this to everyone who saw that slide, everyone who's heard the rumors, everyone who's going to ask questions you don't have good answers for. Because I'm done explaining myself. I'm done being the stable option you can ignore. I'm done being the punchline." They stood there for another moment, pride warring with survival instinct, and then Tara broke first, turning and walking back to whatever car they'd arrived in. Adrian followed, trying to maintain some dignity, but mostly just looking like someone who'd been in a fight and lost. Serena stayed a moment longer, and I could see her trying to formulate something, some final appeal or threat or guilt trip that would somehow shift the dynamic back in her favor. "Marcus," she said quietly, and her voice had lost all its authority. "This isn't who you are." I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It wasn't friendly or forgiving or any of the things she'd come to expect from me over 2 decades of taking my patience for granted. "No," I said, "this is exactly who I am. You just never paid enough attention to notice." She flinched like I'd hit her, which I guess in a way I had. Hit her with the realization that the controllable husband she'd been mocking had been documenting everything, planning everything, and waiting for exactly the right moment to make her private betrayal a public spectacle. She walked away without another word, and I watched all three of them pile into Adrian's rental car, because his Ferrari still smelled like low tide and poor life choices, and drive away while the neighborhood watched and definitely recorded and absolutely would be discussing this at the next HOA meeting. Mrs. Hughes appeared at my elbow so quickly she must have teleported. "Marcus Hale," she said, and her eyes were bright with excitement and approval. "That was the most magnificent thing I've seen since Walter Thompson told off the HOA president in 1997. I laughed, actually laughed, and accepted the cup of tea she handed me that had apparently been meant for me all along. "They earned it," I said, "every second of it." She patted my arm with the affection of someone who'd just watched their favorite underdog win the championship. "Damn right they did," she said, and I didn't even correct her language because Mrs. Hughes using mild profanity felt like a benediction on everything I'd just accomplished. Serena's work life hemorrhaged over the next 72 hours, and I watched it happen with the detached fascination of someone observing a scientific experiment they'd carefully designed. Reputation is a weird thing. It takes years to build, requires constant maintenance, and can collapse in approximately the time it takes to microwave leftovers once someone introduces doubt into the equation. I didn't have to do anything after the slide incident except exist and occasionally check my phone, because the internet had taken over my revenge operation and was running it with the efficiency of a Fortune 500 company that specializes in destroying people's careers. Clients started texting Serena, and I know this because Zoe had access to her cloud backup. Don't ask me how. Something about two-factor authentication and saved passwords and teenage technical literacy that makes me question what they're actually teaching in computer science classes these days. And we watch the messages roll in like stock prices during a market crash. "Serena, we need to discuss the direction of our campaign given some recent concerns about professionalism," wrote the CEO of some organic juice company that charged $12 for 16 ounces of blended vegetables. Another client, a boutique hotel chain that prided itself on discretion and elegance, sent a more direct message. We're pausing our contract pending an internal review of our vendor partnerships. Translation: we're firing you, but we're going to use corporate language, so you can't claim it's discrimination. A tech startup founder who probably wasn't old enough to rent a car without extra fees wrote, "Hey, Serena, saw some stuff online and our board thinks we should explore other creative partners. No hard feelings?" Except there were definitely hard feelings. You could tell from the passive-aggressive question mark. And the tech bro was absolutely going to tell this story at happy hours for the next 6 months. Jefferson Creative Agency tried damage control, but damage control only works when the damage is controllable. And this situation had moved beyond controllable around the time 37 people screenshot a lobby display and shared it with their personal and professional networks. Serena's boss, a woman named Patricia, who wore statement necklaces that could double as weapons and had built her career on being aggressively professional, called an emergency meeting. I know this because Neil, bless his tendency to overshare when stressed, texted me updates like I was some kind of consultant on the situation. "Patricia is furious," he wrote, using caps lock because apparently the situation required it. "She's talking about company image and client confidence and how this reflects on everyone. Serena's been in her office for an hour. I think she's crying." I didn't feel good about Serena crying. I'm not a monster, despite what my current course of action might suggest. But I also didn't feel bad enough to stop what I'd started. She'd had opportunities to not cheat on me, to not mock me in group chats, to not post selfies that turned our marriage into internet content. Every choice she'd made had been deliberate, calculated, and done with the assumption that I'd never find out or wouldn't care enough to do anything if I did. Well, surprise. I found out, and I cared quite a bit. And her crying in Patricia's office was a direct consequence of her own decisions meeting reality at high speed. Tara tried spinning a story on social media about privacy invasion and cancel culture, because, of course, she did. She posted a long Instagram caption, the kind that requires you to click "see more" multiple times and makes you wonder if the person has ever heard of brevity, about how society judges women more harshly than men and how Serena was being persecuted for living her truth, or whatever language people use when they want to sound enlightened but are actually just defending bad behavior. "My sister is being targeted by a vindictive individual who can't accept that relationships evolve," she wrote. And I had to give her credit for creativity because framing infidelity as relationships evolving took some serious mental gymnastics. The comments section destroyed her. Not just criticized, destroyed. And people who'd clearly done their homework showed up with receipts, posting the photos of Tara hanging on Adrian at parties, pointing out that she worked for his dealership's event planning and had a financial interest in defending him, noting that relationships evolve was a convenient phrase for "my sister cheated and I was probably next in line." Someone with the username Truth Matters 24 wrote, "Interesting how living your truth looks suspiciously like lying to your husband from certain angles." It got 400 likes. Another person commented, "Privacy invasion is a weird way to describe exposing someone's affair with evidence they created themselves." That one got 600 likes, and someone gave it a gold award. Tara deleted the post within 6 hours, but the internet never forgets, and approximately 20 people had screenshot it and shared it to Twitter with commentary that ranged from mockery to genuine psychological analysis of why sisters compete through men. One thread went semi-viral. Some psychology student breaking down the family dynamics with terms like triangulation and narcissistic supply, and making Tara and Serena sound like case studies in a textbook about dysfunction. Tara's phone must have been exploding, and part of me felt bad. A very small part, like the part of your brain that feels guilty for not recycling that one plastic bottle. But mostly I felt vindicated because she'd chosen to defend indefensible behavior and discovered that the court of public opinion doesn't care about your sibling loyalty when the facts are this clear. Neil quietly resigned on Thursday. He sent me a resignation letter by mistake, meant to send it to Patricia, but clicked my name in his contacts because apparently he's as bad at email as he is at security. And it was actually kind of sad. I can no longer work in an environment where I feel partially responsible for allowing a situation that damaged multiple people's lives and relationships, he wrote, which was surprisingly self-aware for someone who kept his password on a sticky note. I should have noticed something was wrong. I should have said something. I failed in my basic duty to maintain a professional environment. I almost replied to tell him it wasn't his fault, that he was just a receptionist caught in the crossfire of other people's terrible decisions. But then I remembered he'd let Serena's friends mock me in the lobby while he nodded along, because he thought it was funny, so I let him sit with his guilt. Adrian's dealerships faced what corporate communications professionals call reputational challenges, and what normal people call everyone finding out you're a sleazy jerk. His Yelp reviews suddenly mentioned his questionable personal ethics, which you're not supposed to include in business reviews, but people did anyway, because review platforms are basically the Wild West of accountability. Someone left a one-star review that just said, "Bought a car here, before I knew the owner destroys families for fun. Would not recommend." It got marked as useful by 47 people. Another review, this one with 2 stars because apparently the cars themselves were fine, noted, "Good inventory, shame about the owner's character. Also, his Ferrari smells weird." Adrian tried legal posturing, had his lawyer send a cease and desist letter to approximately nobody because you can't cease and desist the truth, and discovered that threatening legal action just makes you look more guilty. His dealerships started seeing fewer walk-ins, and Sam's contacts in the industry reported that his sales team was getting nervous about commissions drying up. He's got a meeting with his business partners next week. Sam told me over coffee that had been purchased with money I'd saved by not funding hotel rooms for my wife's affair. Word is, they're concerned about the negative publicity affecting all 3 locations. They might force him out, or at least demand he step back from client-facing roles. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but was more likely just indigestion from the truly terrible breakfast burrito I'd eaten. And then I remembered Adrian waving at me through that FaceTime call, standing in his expensive robe in a hotel room with my wife saying, "Hey, Marcus." Like we were buddies who'd simply bumped into each other at a hardware store. The sympathy evaporated. His dealerships would survive or they wouldn't. His business partners would keep him or they wouldn't. And either way, he'd learned an important lesson about the relationship between private behavior and public consequences. Lucas texted me from college. "Dad, you played 4D chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Love you. Also, can you send money for textbooks?" I sent the money because being vindictive toward my kids' education would make me a worse person than I was comfortable being. And also because Lucas had been solidly in my corner since the beginning. Zoe sent me a meme of a cat wearing sunglasses with the caption, "When you're quiet but deadly," which I think was supposed to be a compliment about my strategy. She'd been collecting screenshots of social media reactions to the whole situation, organizing them in a folder she'd labeled Mom's Greatest Hits, with a level of sarcasm that made me proud as a parent and concerned as someone who's supposed to be teaching her about forgiveness and empathy. I didn't feel vindictive sitting at my kitchen table on Friday evening watching Serena's professional reputation crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. I felt vindicated, which is different. Vindictive means you want to hurt someone for the sake of hurting them. Vindicated means you've been proven right after everyone told you that you were wrong, paranoid, insecure, all the words Serena had used to gaslight me into doubting my own perception of reality. She'd treated trust as a joke, something to mock in group chats and laugh about with Adrian. I'd treated truth like a contract, something with terms and conditions that matter. And when she violated those terms, I'd simply provided documentation of the violation and let reality handle the consequences. Sam called it justice. Zoe called it karma. Mrs. Hughes called it about damn time someone held that woman accountable. I called it exhausting because revenge, even the justified, well-documented, surgical kind, takes energy. And I'd been running on adrenaline and spite for weeks. But it was the good kind of exhausting, the kind you feel after finishing a project you've been working on forever and finally getting to see the results. Serena's career hadn't been destroyed, not completely. She still had her job, technically, though Patricia had quietly removed her from client-facing roles and reassigned her to internal projects that nobody cared about. Her reputation had taken damage that would take years to repair, if it could be repaired at all, because the internet has a long memory and people love a good downfall story, especially when the person falling had been arrogant enough to think they'd never hit the ground. Adrian's business was stumbling, but not collapsed. Tara's social media had gone quiet, and Neil was probably working somewhere else by now. Hopefully somewhere with better security practices and less drama. The whole situation had played out exactly the way Sam predicted it would. Clean execution, documented evidence, public exposure that nobody could argue with because it was all true. They'd built their little conspiracy on the assumption that I'd never find out, or if I did, that I'd be too stable and controllable to fight back. They'd been wrong on both counts, and now they were dealing with the aftermath while I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and planning absolutely nothing because the planning phase was over, the truth was out, the consequences were unfolding, and all I had to do was watch and occasionally answer supportive texts from people who'd decided I was either a hero or a cautionary tale depending on their personal views about marriage and revenge. I organized the parent-teacher mixer because apparently I'm a masochist who enjoys scheduling my own public executions, except this time I wasn't the one being executed. The event was my idea. Volunteered for it back when my marriage was still technically intact, and I thought community involvement made me look like a responsible adult instead of someone plotting elaborate revenge. I invited everyone, parents, board members, PTA members who take their positions way too seriously, teachers who needed a break from grading papers, and most importantly, the smug people who clap at their own jokes and think their kids are gifted when really they're just average with wealthy parents. Serena strutted in wearing confidence she no longer had any right to, dressed like she was heading a trade show instead of attending a school function at a gymnasium that smelled like decades of adolescent anxiety and floor wax. Adrian arrived 20 minutes later because apparently they'd given up on subtlety, and he had that expression people wear when they think they're about to be the life of the party but are actually about to become the cautionary tale. I watched them work the room, shaking hands and smiling like nothing had happened, like the slide incident was ancient history instead of last week's entertainment. At exactly 7:30, right after Principal Ortega finished her opening remarks about community and excellence and other words that sound important but mean nothing, I grabbed the microphone. "I'd like to share something about trust," I said, and the room went quiet in that way that happens when people sense drama incoming. I told a joke about creative directors and trust that got a few uncomfortable laughs, and then I nodded at Zoe stationed by the projector. The slideshow played on the gymnasium's massive screen. Texts between Serena and Adrian. Timestamps. Dashcam audio transcribed in clean, readable font. Hotel receipts. The selfie with "Real Men Trust" caption. Our family photo with a new caption underneath. Real men trust? Or do they just let people rent their loyalty? The gym went quieter than a funeral, which was appropriate because several relationships were dying in real time. Serena tried to make it melodrama, standing up and declaring this was harassment. Adrian attempted to storm out like an CEO in a bad movie. But Principal Ortega and Officers Bell and Ortiz had just walked in, because I'd tipped them off about a potential disturbance, and suddenly leaving seemed complicated. The slideshow looped. People recorded. Some gasped. Mrs. Hughes, seated front row, sipped her tea with the satisfaction of someone watching their favorite show's season finale. The officer said I'd technically done nothing illegal, which is the best kind of nothing because it means you can walk away clean while everyone else scrambles to explain their actual crimes. Everything I'd shown came to me honestly. Texts sent to my phone, audio from my dash cam, receipts from our joint credit card that I had every legal right to access. You didn't hack anything, didn't steal anything, didn't make anything up, Officer Bell explained while Adrian sputtered about defamation, and Serena tried the tears routine that probably worked on men who hadn't spent 2 decades learning her manipulation playbook. You just shared information about your own life. That's protected speech. The community took sides fast, faster than I'd expected, honestly. Some people called me a crusader, a hero standing up for wrong spouses everywhere. Others called me vengeful, petty, someone who should have handled this privately, like adults are supposed to. A few people, mostly Serena's remaining friends, and people who think airing dirty laundry is worse than creating dirty laundry in the first place, suggested I was the real villain for humiliating her publicly. I didn't care about their opinions because their opinions came from people who valued image over integrity and thought keeping secrets was more important than telling truths. My son Lucas texted, "Best Dad Award. Pizza?" which was his way of saying he was proud without having to use emotional vocabulary that might make him uncomfortable. Zoe wanted pepperoni now, immediately, because apparently watching your mother's life implode works up an appetite. We ordered from that place downtown that has questionable health ratings but excellent garlic knots. And we ate in the living room while Zoe scrolled through social media reactions and provided commentary like a sports announcer calling a particularly dramatic game. Serena's career cratered over the following weeks. Patricia finally let her go with a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement that probably cost the agency more than just firing her outright would have. Tara's phone blew up with hate messages until she made all her accounts private and stopped posting entirely. Neil moved to a new city and a new job, probably told people he was looking for a fresh start instead of admitting he was running from embarrassment. Adrian tried legal posturing, sent threatening letters that his lawyer probably knew were pointless, and found his dealerships less patient when the press called asking about the owner's personal controversies affecting business reputation. I sat at my old kitchen table, the one Serena had wanted to replace with something more modern, but I'd insisted was fine, and thought about trust. She'd mocked my insecurity, weaponized my stability against me, treated our marriage like a joke she could laugh about with friends and affair partners. I didn't explode or vanish or do any of the dramatic things people expect from betrayed spouses. I made the quiet move that changed everything. I exposed the truth, let it live where everyone could see it, and then I shut down the show. Forever, people love drama, but I prefer the kind that ends with peace and pizza.